to Australia, UK, America. And so the economy relies upon population growth. And when you join Israel, you have to enroll in the IDF for 3 years. And so, you either have to be, kind of subscribe to the radical ideology of believing that you're giving service for the Jewish population, and therefore you're willing to engage in crimes against humanity. And so that's, whatever side of that equation you sit upon as a Jewish person, you kind of, Israel's the least safest place for you to be right now. So that obviously puts a massive constraint on population growth at the same time as the wealthy seeing their assets. You've got an inflationary situation. You've got a buoyant stock market because much of the industry is military, financial, technology. And so you're having kind of this inflationary environment in terms of those assets, but much more distress in terms of the real economy. And so as the real economy gets worse, wealth inequality gets worse, population decline, no new increase in population, you're finding that it's increasingly reliant upon foreign investment. When you are reliant upon foreign investment, you lose sovereignty, and then the whole purpose of a Jewish state, when you start receiving outbound investment, depends upon whether that investment is coming aligned to the original, the ideological, and Jewish nature of the funding. And so really the breakdown of the inbound investment, whether that's coming from Gulf countries or whether that's coming from Jewish people, will really determine the future. And so you've had these weird situations where the Irish central bank came out and said, we won't approve any of these prospectuses, which is an interesting way. Obviously, Ireland has been a huge proponent of the ideological anti-genocidal element of this because of their background between, their struggle with England and Britain. And they know the whole propaganda campaigns that are engaged in to frame what's happening as something else. And then they call you terrorists whenever you resist against the colonizer. And so the Irish, I think, in general, have been very ideologically aligned. They're also going through their own identity crisis as a result of the demographic and immigration issues that are happening across the whole of the collective West. And so, you've got these two different types of ideologies. And then for the central bank to come out and say, we won't approve any Israeli prospectus, which means that they can't do offering, they can't raise capital. Now, Ireland is actually very, very significant because although it's a very small, it's a small place. It is actually the center of much of the tax efficiency for many of the massive, large technical and pharmaceutical companies in America. So many American giants set up their base in Ireland, and they use it to manage their tax efficiency. So it's no small. It sounds like a small thing, but it's actually incredibly sufficient. Not sufficient. It's incredibly significant in terms of its implication. Because of its relationship with the US and Ireland's relationship with the US as well. So it's a pretty good boycott. And obviously we talked about Norway's sovereign wealth fund. That's the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. They're divesting. And so the whole sanctioning, boycotting, and divestment is really just becoming America as an isolated state particularly as this month we're meant to be getting most of the European nations recognizing Palestine as a state. It's just going to leave America on their own, America can bribe, and Israel as a pariah state. And really, the second that American corporations decide whether they want to support Israel or dump Israel, is kind of the entire economy right now. So there's nothing sustainable about it. They are fully vassalized into corporate interests, and whoever ends up purchasing those assets will determine the future of what Israel becomes. And that's kind of the transfer that we're witnessing. And then then you saw some of the counter games that are happening with the Florida state saying, well, let's just force our pension fund money into Israel so that we can have a say on the future of it as well. So it's a very interesting exercise in watching how the financial weapons of mass destruction can determine the political outcome in the end. Did you want to add anything to that, Silly?
No, I just agree with it. I agree in the sense of obviously Israel is a toxic asset, and that is going to obviously continue to be the case because of essentially what I believe the plans are going to be for the next year or so. The question becomes that will these countries or these bodies continue to have these positions if Israel does come out of a situation where it stops partaking in war or the genocide? So that's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more embargoes. We saw Turkey. Look, we all know Turkey talks but doesn't walk. But the point is it's becoming very unpopular and more costly and less profitable to associate your country with Israel, which is one of the desired goal. You can almost, it's a bit like what Europe and America tried to do with Russia. Initially, it was like, okay, we have to figure out all these covert routes because America and Europe are still importing from Russia, but they need to make like a farce, which then creates these other geopolitical impacts where you have India, being able to contribute a significant amount to their GDP as a result of sitting between these geopolitical hypocrisies that just end up, and that kind of brings us into the Europe conversation and the America conversation, that on one side we've got America, on the political level at least, fully associating with Israel till the end, with the only country left in the entire world and the entire international community. It's releasing a massive hypocrisy at the same time as these, what I believe to be very deliberate civil unrest campaigns that we've been talking about. And so when you have a part of your population that's been witnessing a genocide and aligning with a very vocal and protest-driven pro-Palestinian movement, and then at the same time you have the other ideology of those that have bought into decades and decades of brainwashing around what Israel is and what it means to, the persecution of Jewish people in the past, and you put all that together, and then you change all your laws where it looks like the president of the country doesn't care about the American people, and they even do things like, oh, we'll give the no state can have access to aid if they boycott Israel. And then you have states diverting their municipal state pensions over to Israel. And then you get these very strange connections to the cover-up of what many people to believe to be a Mossad operation with paedophilia and sexual blackmailing with Jeffrey Epstein. It's almost like you've got this very large intentional gaslighting of fueling these different ideologies. You then couple that with, the immigration policies, and then deportations, which don't happen, but they lead into much of the civil unrest. And you have this perfect recipe that we're seeing across the collective West, whether that be Canada, whether that be Australia, whether that be UK, whether that be France, whether that be Germany, that be America. And it's almost like you've got the perfect environment to just really manufacture civil unrest and just usher in this whole the companies like Palantir, X, Elon Musk companies, Peter Thiel's companies, those technocracy companies just have this really ideal opportunity to offer solutions and say, well, we can do pre-crime, we can offer the solution that will catch people before they commit the crime. And you need all of these very extravagant, tragic events in order to justify the removal of much of these, freedom of speech rights. So you can just see financially, if you look around the circle, that there are very clear interests that can align with the immigration policy, the civil unrest that results, and really the changing geopolitical situation where it looks like the sacrifice of what we would call, quote unquote, the collective West, and much of the ideology that many people have believed that their country was a part of, which can lead to massive opportunities for private equity firms like Blackstone and KKK to purchase much of the nationalized assets, turn many of these countries into toxic assets. They can also get funding in partnership with many of the Gulf countries and the Sovereign Wealth Fund in order to accumulate these assets. And you're just getting a population that is just starting to think, does my government even work for me? We got all these homeless people. We got these wealth inequality. We got this K-shaped economy. And all you care about is sending money to Lockheed Martin for more and more war and weapons. And this is just really, I think everyone can feel that the collective West is just being pushed to this pressure point that is going to really maximize the portfolio value of these distressed asset acquisitions, and many of the companies that are going to be profiting from this whole, lack of care about the people and the populations, because our governments just don't work for us anymore. They're all paid for by lobbies, and every single asset is being turned into a public company. And because we're all handing over all of our pension money to the large asset managers, they're just using our money to control and profit from the demise of any remnants of a country that cares about its people. And I think that's what we're witnessing right now.
So, Simon, can I ask you a quick question? You had said
Go for it.
back several weeks ago or months ago that ultimately Israel would be kind of, I guess, turned into a toxic asset. I think something similar to that. Can you elaborate on that, and then and how that's going to happen? And does that have anything to do, or does that tie into what you had mentioned earlier with the Israeli bonds? Because we had discussed what's going on in Florida, where legislation had to be passed in order to lower the rating from A level to essentially not having a minimum requirement in order for them to purchase the bonds, because they're basically at junk level at this point. Does that kind of tie into that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect science, but I do believe across powerful money managers and corporations across America, there is this kind of big ideological struggle between the traditional nationalistic version of America, which was kind of, using Israel as a mechanism for serving foreign interests, interests in terms of war profits, oil resources, and generally preventing a competing world order. But the need for that has disappeared as these global institutions, which I think is the global element of those that control America, the a national part that don't care about anything nationalist, the BlackRocks, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs. I think they have a different vision, which was really epitomized in the meeting with Xi Jinping and Putin and Modi in the SEO meeting in Shanghai. I think they've invested into that vision. And so you've got like these residue people that have been paid for by APAC competing with a vision that wants to just acquire, I think, Israel and hand it over to the GCC nations so that they can make strategic investments alongside the GCC and their sovereign wealth funds, reset the world order from, one that was an area that was just plagued by US and Israeli engineered war, and turn it into something investable. And so whether the Israeli bonds turn out to be a good investment or a bad investment, it is very much a question of what is Israel going to become. Is it going to become a vassal state of the GCC, in which case it could be a good investment? Or is it going to be this whole greater Israel project of a forever war in the region, in which case it will permanently just be a tool for US foreign policy? But America, the world is resetting. We don't live in that world anymore. So sorry to not give you a good answer, but there are different people that have access to different levels of information. And my guess is that Florida is kind of the legacy model of, Zionist lobby money, maybe Jewish aligned financing, and they're making an investment in order to prop up an economy, that maybe it will be, these bonds will just be, acquired by GCC or something. So I don't really have a good answer for you, but I think it's reflective of the financial struggle of this change in the world order that we're experiencing right now. And I don't know whether they're going to be a good investment or not.
Well, I think more attention is being turned towards it now. I mean, more people are figuring out these investments in the state of Florida specifically and aren't happy about it. So, Miami-Dade is, I think, the next domino. The people are upset about it. So I think the more people that realize what's happening, that's going to be an issue. And what do you make of Trump saying that recently that he was surprised that Israel's lobby in Congress isn't as influential as it once was? Do you believe that, or do you think he's just kind of talking out of his rear end as usual?
Yeah, we could all have an opinion. Maybe Sully's got an opinion as well, but I think it was the meeting. There was a second meeting where Netanyahu and Trump were around a dinner table. And if I remember, sorry if I'm quoting it incorrectly, I think he was talking around that Netanyahu has lost the support of Congress or something along those lines. I think there is factions. Here's the important part to me. I don't think Congress matters. Like, Congress is not as important as most people think. Congress can be bought. And while there may be a faction that have an evangelical Christian ideology around returning the Messiah, and therefore they will do anything to support Israel, I think they can be turned very easily by the more powerful forces in the world. So the fact that he's saying that you've lost Congress, I'm not sure, because my overarching theory, which is very different from most people, is that Trump was installed because his job was to reset the world order, push the world to BRICS, and shrink America into a regional power and just manage this transition of creating absolute chaos within America, and then also allowing for the sacrifice of Europe to be completely vassalized into these American corporations. And then also at the same time, many of the export-dependent countries across the ASEAN regions just get as much power to BlackRock for as long as the American capital markets and the dollar can be weaponized against the American people. Just because America is the host of BlackRock and these JP Morgans, they're just trying to utilize America for as long as possible and destroy Europe and destroy the collective West for their own use. And Trump was, through his tariff policy, the person to usher in that change. And so at some point, I'm expecting the banks and financial institutions drop Israel and the military stop profiting from Israel. And there will be, I think, a clear moment when that is known and understood, but he's got to manage that transition, in my perspective. I know this is a different view for many. And so, I believe there was a very deliberate operation to completely destroy the reputation of Israel, which is easy because all you have to do is be honest. And then there's a massive faction that are holding on to old ideologies and trying to blame the Muslims. And then those at the top know that if you can create this whole Muslim invasion that Elon Musk is perpetuating, and then at the same time you can create the narrative that Jews rule the world and America is a vassal state of Israel, you combine those narratives together and you can create absolute chaos. And I think that's kind of what we're witnessing. So it's a little bit, they're just trying to put you in a box. You're either in the box of Jews rule the world, or you're in the box of, you're anti, the Muslims are trying to invade and take over the world. And that's epitomized in the Qatar rules the world narrative and the Zionist AIPAC rule the world narrative. That's how I see it. Maybe Sully thinks differently.
Yeah, obviously I do slightly think differently, but let's shall we talk about one of the other topics? I just want to welcome Darkside onto the space as well. Simon, what was your thoughts on the World Liberty Financial in terms of, I saw a tweet you did in the weekend about it, but what's your thoughts about Trump releasing his World Liberty Financial coin? It was pre-trading. It started at about 40 million. Just before pre-trading, it did drop to about 20 million, and then when it was released, it went from 20 all the way to 40, and then within 5 minutes dropped back down and went back to around the 20 millions. Not the same level of, I would say, enthusiasm or interest or liquidity that went into that coin. Didn't do as well. And yeah, what's your thoughts on that? And then obviously Trump releasing coins as well.
Yeah, so there's a few things to get from this. So firstly, in the industry, you have Bitcoin, and then you have these alternative blockchains that are mainly around proof of stake. Bitcoin sits on its own, and then you have this old crypto market. And obviously Ethereum